I'll stand.
You're good.
The height on my side. Instead of the height on my side. Yep, cake is all the way on the left. We have jump, Psy, AK, Hydro, and Vagrant. This is going to be the big thing. We are at RTX. I'll give some information. We are at RTX right now. This is the Project Rose panel, the Art of Epic Animation, where we have Cake Station anime. We have Cake Station, we have Jump, we have Psy, AK Motions, Hydro, and Vagrant, all of them. And they are going to be presenting all this amazing information to all these people and to all of you guys. So be ready for greatness. Thank you, Stream Elements, for saying that the bot is running. Bunkatron. So if the camera quality is really shaky, yes, it is. My apologies. No, I do not. I'm not Cake. Cake is up on stage, all the way on the left. He is standing right there. I'll do my best, but I might sit and it'll be a little bit lower, but you will definitely be able to see it all. All for you guys. Oh, you're good, no worries. If you're saying thank you to me, I appreciate that. Oh, I feel so welcomed. Not thank yous to them, the people that actually are doing the big thing. I just need to hold the camera and not seem nervous, even though I'm not on stage. Hand reveal when? For who? You can see all their hands up there. The panel will be about Monty and the animation style of recreating it. So they will be talking about Monty Oum and his starting days and how you don't need expensive equipment or things like that in order to start out. Thank you. Yes, cameramen need love too. Yep. I'm going to turn away just from them for a really quick second. We also have got ourselves some other help as well. Yep. We are the camera crew for today. Yeah, this is all going to be for your guys' knowledge and wanting to learn how to animate better. This is a whole presentation that they made, and yeah. Here, I'm going to see. Is this good? I'm going to be sitting, so it's like a little bit steadier. It's actually a little worse. Well, trying to figure out the best way to do it. I am Bunkatron in the Cake Station server, yes. I just posted, will the VOD be online? I believe so, yes. I'm not sure.
I don't think this VOD is going to stay online.
Maybe not.
Recording it
yes, there will be a dedicated video to nervous people holding cameras for us acting. Hey, that's why they're on stage and we're back here. That's the whole point. What's it? What was the question from before? I'm so dumb. Whatever. Oh yeah, I am Bunkatron in the K Station server. I just posted a picture of me with, you know, the rando, you know, just the the guy that just signed my badge for no reason. But yeah, they've all been having fun. They've been practicing like crazy. We're just ready to see the magic right before us. If there's a few parts and stops, just keep in mind they have been working hard towards this. About an hour, I think, for length-wise. They'll do their presentation, and then there'll be a Q&A. All of it will fit into an hour time frame. It'll start at 4 Texas time. I don't know, Central time. Texas time is what time it is here. We don't think of others. We just think of Texas. Of course, of course. Darn, when the presentation starts, I'll shut up the whole time. Don't you worry. I'll be fucking quiet.
Nope. All right. Hello. So, once there was a man who said that he was the best. Not the best filmmaker, the best animator, the best writer, but the best at the things that he could do. The best Monty. A man who truly understood what it meant to give 100%. This story is about Monty Oum's work, transcending himself, inspiring a generation of artists, and giving them the resolve to endeavor and achieve. There will never be another Monty. But that makes the art he left us behind so much more precious. So our goal since day one has been to archive and preserve and try to teach people that this is something that they can do as well, and try and help his art really transcend himself. So today we would like to give you an example of what we have learned since we started.
I couldn't take it, couldn't stand another minute. Couldn't bear another day without you in it. All of the joy that I had known for all my life was stripped away from me the minute that you died. To have you in my life was all I ever wanted. But now without you, I'm my soul forever haunted. Can't help but feel that I had taken you for granted. No way in hell that I could ever come to this. I wasn't dreaming when they told me you were gone. But I was feeling that I needed to be wrong. I knew that you were just letting you instead. Now I'm second to every single other day. It's like a movie, but there's not a happy ending. You can see that you were after there's no pretending. Just put up the right down, I've been seeing it in a while. Just let me tell you everyone what you don't know. I know you think you guys do it.
Project Rose panel, and without further ado, I would like to introduce the members of Project Rose in attendance. Starting with Jordan.
Hey, I'm the group archivist, keeping track of Monty's life, as well as an animator.
And Mia.
Hi, I'm Mia, or I go by Sai online. I'm the group asset production lead.
And Landon.
I focus on all aspects, animation, choreography, mostly choreography, just a little bit of everything.
And Eric.
Hey, I'm Eric. I'm one of the members that will focus on visual effects and also do animation as well.
And lastly, Hunter.
Yes, I'm Hunter, also known as Sai, that's my name. Also known as Favorite. I focus on animation and choreography, along with a couple more things.
So, before I started Project Rose, I had already been studying Monty Oum's work for about 5 years. And for the longest time, I was doing it completely on my own. Starting Project Rose was nothing but a desperate attempt to try and find other people who were just as obsessed with Monty's work as I was. And very shortly afterwards, I met Jordan, who I found out had already made a massive archive of saved Monty Oum interviews and videos, older works and stuff like that. And then over time, I just discovered more and more people, and collectively, we all realized that we were no longer alone. Our goal as Project Rose is to do like I said before, is to try and preserve Monty's art style and sort of preserve it the way that Cubism or Impressionism is. It's a legitimate art form that people can select, you know, just to make it its own thing and not try to be anything else. Today we're going to be talking about the aspects that make up a typical Monty Oum animation, and then try to teach you how you can do it yourself. And if we have any time afterwards, we'll open it up for a Q&A. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Jordan.
Thank you, Gabe. You also forgot to show off our socials.
I did that in the practice run too.
You all should be archivists by now. Okay, so I am the archivist. I'm the one that kind of studies his life a lot. And I asked the question, what made Monty Monty? As many of you know, Monty Oum was the creator of Ruby. He was also the animator behind some of Red vs. Blue's best moments. A lesser known fact, he was also a comic designer at Namco and Midway Games. But Monty was also a modeler, editor, writer, photographer, cinematographer, texture artist, director, poet, dancer, gamer, friend. Monty was many things. And for as long as I have studied him, I have wondered how he was able to work so hard and for so long. What drove him to skip sleep to push his art forward? And one thing became abundantly clear. Monty believed that pushing himself every moment he had was the only way to live. His work largely became his life, and this took the form of ruthless efficiency. He would surround himself with an ever-increasing amount of monitors and mocap equipment to exceed his human limits. He would work through holidays if it meant pushing a project forward. He would listen to the music he needed to animate to on his commutes to work to internalize it. And later, he just moved across the street from the office so he could work and live there. Monty never had enough time, and he learned never to waste a moment. His groundbreaking work, Haloid, was made in 2 months, self-taught, alone. The Ruby Red trailer, that was animated in 2 weeks. Countless testimonials from the people that knew him in life all say the same thing. He was incredibly dedicated to his craft. The impression he left behind was so strong, it's brought us all here today, so many years later. Keep moving forward. If you know Monty, you know his signature phrase. These 3 words perfectly encapsulate the life and philosophy of Monty Oum. The through line between his art and the man himself. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Gabriel to tell us about the structure of Monty's work so we can understand what made it so great.
Very good job. Thank you very much. So, the first most important thing. There we go. The first most important thing you need to think about when you're doing a Monty Oum style animation is the story. You need to start with a story. Because everything in a Monty Oum animation has some kind of meaning. And if you don't apply some kind of a story to your animation, then it'll be nothing but a bunch of pointless flipping and fighting and punching for absolutely no reason at all. Even Monty Oum's shortest animation, Icarus, is about two men and their temporary ceasefire in order to fight a large horde of enemies that are going for both of them. So even just that is a big enough through line to make your animation more motivated and more interesting. We've also got visuals and color, camera. All of that stuff helps. Like I was saying before, everything that Monty did in his animations had some kind of a meaning, and that didn't stop at just the story. With visuals, color, and camera, camera angles, they can have an influence on the feeling of a scene. The color can, activate instinctive responses to certain colors, and the visuals will just enhance everything after that. To illustrate what I'm talking about, I've got a little bit of an example scene here, and this is bad. It's not very good. It's rather dull. If we're not feeling anything while watching this, maybe we're feeling bored. So what we'll try to do is we'll try and make her look more intimidating. We've got a lowered camera looking up at her. Now we've made her pose a little bit more intimidating, giving her a wider stance. And then a really important thing is we'll actually drop the background to emphasize her silhouette. Otherwise everything is the same brightness, and in motion that's going to get really confusing. And then at the end, we've darkened it a little bit and we've shifted the entire color tone towards red. And now you can see, after just a few minuscule changes, we've completely altered the audience's perception of this character. As you can see there. Another interesting aspect of Monty's philosophy is that he had this thing where he said, think in 2D, animate in 3D. So 3D, a lot of things you get for free. One of those things is object permanence. The permanence of the scale of something, of the shape of something, the position of something. But in anime, as he was very heavily influenced by, every single frame has to be drawn, which means that you can take every single frame to take full creative control of that shot. It's not just gonna be there. So he took full advantage of that. If characters were overlapping on a 2D cell, you could imply contact even if they're 10 feet away. Or, I can't remember another example, but you can see a little bit of perspective shifting. They look pretty normal, you would think, but then we have an example of a shot from the White trailer where instead of Monty actually changing the focal length of the camera, he just increased her hand. And in the actual camera view, it looks normal. And that was what he was talking about. When you think in 2D, you're only thinking from the perspective of the camera and nothing else. So you can get funny angles like that. Basically, you don't want to watch a Monty Oum animation from any angle except from the camera. And so now, I would like to turn this over to Mia to talk about assets.
Yay, it's my turn. You have to listen to me squabble for a little bit. Okay, so, as Gabriel was saying earlier, Monty preferred speed and efficiency over absolute perfection and perfect quality of his animations. Those choices carried over from his actual animations to the assets. And for those who don't know what an asset is basically what we call anything that you see in the screen. So a model, the background, the effects, the sound, anything you see or hear, we consider that an asset. So nowadays, most of us aspiring animators go to the internet and search for a model that we wanted. So say if you wanted a model of Master Chief, you could really easily Google that and you'll get a plethora of resources from places like DeviantArt, SFM Workshop, any place you can think of nowadays. Back when Monty was doing animations, that was very different. DeviantArt and places like that still existed, but it was a lot harder to find assets for Monty's animations because he used a very obscure program called Poser. If you're into essentially Ruby era animation at all, you will have heard of the Poser era and the Maya era. This is what Poser was. Poser was a posing program, primarily, not an animation program. So as you can kind of assume, getting assets for this instead of for programs like 3ds Max or Maya, as were the standard and still kind of are the standard. It's a lot harder. So Monty liked to buy assets and save time by buying assets rather than having to sit and make assets by himself. And many of the assets came from the DAZ store, which actually some of the assets I have here to show you today can still be bought on the DAZ store. So yeah, that still exists. Monty, he liked to game, obviously. A lot of his work kind of reflected that. Haloid, Red versus Blue, a lot of them are game derivative. And because they're game derivative, luckily for him, we were in the 3D era of games, so it was really easy to rip games and rip models from games. Well, maybe easy is not the right word for it. He had a lot of help, especially in the 2000s when you couldn't find stuff like that very easily. It was a lot harder to find assets of Master Chief or Tifa or whoever you wanted to animate with. So he had a lot of help, and there's a lot of different credits given to people across the years in his game trailer words are hard, in his game trailer descriptions. Some like Mr. Y, which is an anonymous ripper, which we've never found, by the way. Maybe Mr. Y is one of you. If you are coming to us, we'd like to talk to you. We also have people like Blackbirdie, Mario Kart, 64N, Drywater. There's a lot of people that Monty got help from in the past, as well as just buying stuff from the DAZ store and kit bashing stuff, which is where you take pieces, put them together, you make something new. It's great. It's like making a cake, but the cake is an animation. So I'm going to go through a few of Monty's videos. I won't go through all of them, because if I did go through all of them, we'll be here forever. So we're going to go through his top ones. Obviously, we're going to start with Haloid. Haloid was made roughly 2007 era, so obviously games from that era. Master Chief himself from Halo 2, not Halo 3, even though Halo 3 came out in 2007. It was very hard to rip from still, so Halo 2. The backgrounds are the Half-Life 2 buildings, ripped by someone from Reddit. And Zero Suit Samus, we believe, was just a poser model asset, which Monty hand-painted to look like Samus. Fun, right? We love that. So he will continue then on to Red versus Blue, which I have labeled Haloid. That's incorrect. This is Red versus Blue. So Monty joined Red versus Blue obviously later on into production. Red versus Blue is kind of self-explanatory. The assets updated as the season progressed. The only assets that Monty or / Brewster team ever did use were also poser assets, or DAZ assets as well. The people under the suits, DAZ assets, and the backgrounds, interestingly enough, were all hand-taken screenshots by Monty that were rebuilt in the engine to make backgrounds, because you couldn't rip backgrounds from games because it was just awkward. So there's another small show as well. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. Maybe Dead Fantasy, not Ruby yet. We're not on to Ruby yet. Dead Fantasy, Monty's baby, essentially. There's a lot about Dead Fantasy which we can source because it's a lot of small pieces from a long time ago. The internet has changed a lot of threads.
The far-flung year of 2006.
Once upon a time, right? So Dead Fantasy, we have found some stuff, not a lot. A lot of the sourcing from Dead Fantasy is from another member of Project Rose who couldn't be here with us today, called Lebowski. We owe a lot to him for sourcing assets. He was here a lot long before me, and he's found a lot of stuff. But just for today, the background assets of Dead Fantasy 1 and 2, at least, come from a pack called Amazonia, which is on a website called Renderosity, which is still available today and is on sale. Go buy them.
On sale for summer.
Yeah, imagine. On sale for RTX, you can use your badge.
Yeah.
So you can go buy these. These are model part packs, so while the big main buildings, like you can see the big tower and the weird triangular building that you see in 0.2 frames in the background for a second, those all exist. They are all part packs. So Monty still built the stages, but obviously they still exist. So if you want to build your own stage, go for it. Share it with us. Yeah, Ruby. When it wants to change the slide, Ruby. There we go. So obviously,
Ruby.
Woo, Ruby. Obviously, Ruby was Monty's original IP and it was his baby, but his mentality didn't shift. If you could buy stuff at the same time, he'd do that because easy. So we have a few stuff here. We have obviously the white trailer room. which has a few changed assets. You can see the windows don't have the Schnee logo or the tables. I think it'd be a very awkward fight if I fought the night over a bunch of tables. So the only thing changed there with the white trailer is the logos in the windows. The logo in the window is, and the Schnee crest is actually a Photoshop pack mashed together a little bit. It's really interesting. Those are on the internet too. I just can't remember the name of them. Also the yellow trailer, which if you watch Gabe's animation or if you follow his channel, Cake Station, you would have seen that we used it again in his yellowish trailer, which was a continuation of the yellow trailer. Those are up on Dad's store too. All of these are on the Dad store. They're by someone called Stonemason, who Monty liked to work with quite a lot. Stonemason's work is also in Volume 2 of Ruby, in the trains. A lot of changes done, obviously, so it's not just a carbon copy paste, but still there. Okay, so we also have Roman's mech. Roman's mech came from Turbo Squid, and it's still there on Turbo Squid. A lot of these still exist when you can find them, but when you can't find them, good luck. So this is one of two. We believe this one is obviously the main body of Roman's mech. The hand mesh that he uses to punch Yang into a wall, that comes from a different model, a different robot, which Monty also used and just put the arm on this one. So I'm going to continue on with Ruby now and just talk about the actual style of Ruby. As you can see, I have very important assets on the screen. So, Ruby, if you, obviously I hope you've watched the first 2 seasons of Ruby. If you haven't, okay, why are you here? Go watch it now. So, volumes 1 to 3 of Ruby has a very distinct style compared to my Ruby. Obviously, there's no shadows on the bodies and obviously painted textures. Monty, the Ruby was never physically rendered, so it was all playback, which is when you render just the viewport. So there's no math shading calculations for any of the body. So Monty and Ruby team took and painted the textures on. So they painted shadows and highlights into sections of importance. So obviously then you might be thinking, well, if it wasn't rendered, how did they do the line art? Line art is done, I want to change slide, there we go. Line art is done using a method called inverse hull or backface culling. It's essentially just a glitch. What happens is you take your mesh, you color it black, and you invert the textures, so all the textures are facing inside the model instead of outside the model. And then you scale it up just a smidge, just an itty bitty bit, and you put it back over the head, and that's how you get your line art. I do actually have a guest, well not a guest, but kind of a guest, to explain this.
The sense of error called backface culling, which is when something is a single-sided polygon in a game or in 3D, it means you're seeing it from one side. So here we have 2 layers of the face.
So it's kind of like, you know, when you're in a game and you pull through the floor and you can't see anything? That's because there's no other side.
There's, like, you can see it from one side and not the other. And so the line on the face here is done through essentially a glitch in 3D programs. So I'll show you what I mean.
Just for a little more of explanation as well. You know when like they make a Pixar movie and they render out a frame and it takes like a week? And they say, oh, it took us like 6 months to render out the movie? Essentially what's happening with Ruby is it's all happening live. So if it's like a 5-minute clip, how long does it take to render out a 5-minute clip?
Probably 5 minutes.
Thank you, Monty, very cool. So that's how backface culling works. It's essentially same thing is carried on all the way through the Poser years. Once we get to Maya, it's a different approach towards it, but this is how Poser did it, and I think it's very unique, and this is how we do it, so very cool to show. VFX, these will be covered a bit more in detail later by Eric, but just to cover these lightly right now, VFX were created in Poser, not Poser, they were created in Particle Illusion. Poser couldn't create VFX, but could it be very impressed. So Particle Illusion, which is essentially a separate application to create these effects, render them out in PNG sequences, and then re-import them as animations either into your editing program or into the animation program itself as 2D planes, which we call cards. I won't cover this in too much detail because Eric will be covering this later, which is very interesting, I promise. It's worth sticking around for. So, all in all, Monty's work, he was pretty resourceful when he went gathering cards for his movies, which, in fairness, he kind of had to be back in 2007, especially when Machinima was just getting its legs under it, and you wanted Final Fantasy characters and Dead and Alive characters to beat the ever-living shit out of each other. You couldn't get stuff really easily for that. But just to show that you don't need high-tech computers, you don't need 4090s, you don't really need much to create animations like Monty did. This was his laptop. This worked. He used this for Halo and for Dead Fantasy. And as you can see, it's thoroughly loved. It worked. This photo, it was working in this photo, I promise. It just doesn't have a screen, don't worry about that. You can just imagine stuff in there. Anyway, quality was a luxury, especially in 2007, when we had about 12 polygons for a character. And just don't let your low quality gear or your fear of perfection hold you back. Quality didn't hold Monty back, and it definitely shouldn't hold you back. And I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand it back to Gabe now.
Good job. Choreography. It is probably the biggest part of any Monty Oum animation. It's going to be 90% fighting, which means you have to choreograph it all. Just like everything else we talked about, choreography has a system just like anything else. Every single Monty Oum fight is built up of 3 separate blocks: exchanges, combos, and finishers. We have some examples here. So an exchange is just a bunch of attacks thrown back and forth between 2 characters, and typically this will be punches and kicks, and it'll be dodges and redirections and all that stuff. This is going to be the bulk of your fight. This is what's going to be going on for the majority of it. This is where you get to have fun and be creative, because you're going to be distancing the gap between your combos. So combos are almost the opposite. It's one fighter dominating the entire conflict with a flurry of blows that basically all land. And this would actually also be a build-up to the next element, finishers. So a finisher isn't necessarily for just the end of a fight, but it is a big enough dramatic element that, you know, it'll steal the focus of the fight for a while. And so you have to do everything you can, visuals, camera, particle effects, and sound, everything to lead up to this moment so that the audience knows that positively this opponent is either completely dead or just knocked out for a long time. So choreography, like anything else, is complicated, and those building blocks will help you get there, but you need to actually start thinking of moves, and that's a whole lot more complicated. And to talk about that, I'm going to hand that off to Landon.
Thank you. Choreography is the sequence of movements that make up a fight scene. Thank you. But more importantly, choreography is taking all those cool ideas you have in your head and translating them to the best of your ability. Obviously, one of the main reasons Monty's work is so eye-catching is the non-stop action and choreography he displays in his work. I hear a lot of people saying Monty's animations are very reminiscent of dancing, and that's partly because he did dance, and also partly because he times the choreography to a beat of song. So he'll take a song, a pre-existing song, and then he'll animate to that. For example, here's a Monty animation. He sings to the song My League Up. Hey, that was also, a lot of those were used in Ruby. You notice the gunchucks were reused in Ruby's Season 1 finale. Monty often picked the songs he would use beforehand and animate to the BPM. And it's not just the beat of the song. Oftentimes, you know, just instruments or sounds could inspire different choreography ideas. Say like a high note can be a high punch and a low note can be a low punch. Or like a hold in the song could be, or a hold note could be like a slow motion or like a slide. Or, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can play around. The point is, much like a dance, action can also be driven by music. Monty also talked a lot about AMVs. In AMV, you take your favorite clips of like anime or whatever, and you pair it with like your favorite song. And usually, if it's a good AMV at least, the songs and the BPM of the song will connect with the animations in the clips. So people love AMVs because of that satisfying rhythm and the transitions that stay consistent based on the music. In which case, if you treat your animation like an AMV, and you pick a song beforehand and you animate to the BPM of that, then you'll give the audience that same sort of, much like the MyLecon animation, you'll give the audience that same sort of smoothness and transition and satisfyingness that they get from watching an AMV. Digging deeper into actual choreography, tag-ins and tag-outs are very important. If there's more than 2 characters fighting, when one goes down, you can tag in the next character, and much like a fighting game, if one character runs out of health, you can immediately just, your secondary character will come in and keep the fight going. For example, tag in. No?
Nope, other part.
Tag in. There. Tag-ins do wonders in keeping the fight going for a long period of time. If you've seen Monty's Dead Fantasy, it starts with 1v2, and gradually more and more characters come in on screen and evening out the team. At that point, a tag-in or a tag-out is happening every few seconds. But that doesn't mean the choreography should only consist of tag-ins and tag-outs. If characters are constantly out of frame waiting for their turn, waiting for a character to get hit, and it's just a constantly 1v1s back-to-back, then the fight scene will look scripted. So in order to make things more fun and make things more impressive, multiple people fighting at once is the way to go. The 1v2s, 2v3s, 1v1000s, doesn't matter. The point is, here's some examples Monty did of multiple people fighting each other at once. Those are most likely your favorite parts. They're my favorite parts. They're more impressive. For one, Pyrrha, when Pyrrha is fighting like 3 people at once, it's so much more impressive. Line resignation onto this one. Line resignation, I'm going to talk about fighting games a little bit. A powerful addition to fighting games throughout time, such as Dead or Alive and Tekken, is when characters fight, instead of just having the same old background, they can change positions in the ring. Instead of fighting purely left and right, they can shift the axis of the fight around the whole arena. Here are more examples. Here's an example I did. As you can see, they're moving around, and they'll play a little bit. I had an axis example, so you could just look on any one of those and see where the camera shifts throughout. And there's an overhead view, in case you don't quite get the gist. So, another thing fighting games caught on to is the fact that the characters are all in one place. And so, usually if characters are fighting in the same sort of arena or same room, things get boring. So, fighting games, Dead or Alive, Tekken, probably others, I'm not quite sure, but they have the brilliant idea, such as these clips, where they shift the fight to a whole new place. It's like a character will get thrown into a wall, opens up into a whole new room. Character will get slammed into the ground, you go through the floor and you end up in a new place. Get thrown off a cliff, you end up on another cliff. The point is, when you play those games and that stuff happens, you get this sort of adrenaline, like, yes, cool, new location. And it'll keep things fresh, and okay, well for one, Dead Fantasy 2, if any of you guys have seen Dead Fantasy 2, if not, then why not? And also, just try to imagine, in Dead Fantasy 2, characters go from fighting on a bridge to on top of a building, to breaking the building, to falling off the building, while fighting while falling / sliding down that building, to fighting broken rubble, falling, fighting on that, to fighting in a lava rock, floating down a lava river, to fighting on ground, to fighting in a tornado. Talk about one. So there's a lot. And the point is, when you change sceneries, there's a lot of stuff you can play with. A lot of different choreography moves. For one, if you're fighting on ground, you can't do the same moves you could do fighting in the air. So a lot of this stuff is just, it's most likely why Dead Fantasy 2 is everybody's favorite, including mine. choreography itself, if you think about it, is, Amon, is that next slide? Choreography itself, if you think about it, is just you pulling from a move list, like checking the inventory inside your head and piecing together different moves that you've built up over time. Which is why I recommend you watch anime, most likely, action movies, play fighting games. Just surround yourself with a bunch of different types of action. And over time, all the action that you put into your eyes will translate and you'll get a better feel of the dynamics that play into a fight. Monty had 7 computers, and including laptops, I don't know. He had a lot of screens in front of him, and multiple of those were constantly playing action movies and giving him a constant, like, little charge. It's like a charger. He's just constantly recharging his motivation and inspiration. Some psychology you can use for that as well. You become what you behold. Imagine if, as a child, you owned a console that only had Dead or Alive and Tekken. As you grow up playing those sorts of video games, you're most likely going to, appreciate those genres of games more than others. Which is why, become what you behold also works with choreography and animation in general. If you surround yourself with choreography, anime, movies, action, stuff like that, just in general, then, over time you're just going to, the move list in your head will grow and your choreography will get better. So the point of that, watch anime. it's the easiest part of your job. You could literally just sit down on a couch, watch some anime, eat some popcorn, and you're working. That's speed, power, and quality. And I'm not going to go over sexy because that's too long. But these are 3 main ingredients to making a fight good. Speed covers timing, rhythm, and where necessary, really pushing all of the available elements to enhance the sensation of speed. Changing the FOV of the camera, frame jitters, speed lines, there we go. All of these have speed lines. And things whizzing by in the background really enhance or help to sell the illusion of high-speed movement. Power covers strong poses, witty timing, and using things like effects, editing, and camera angles to really help put the punch into your animations. Punch. If you see there, Hitomi is glowing for no reason. It's cool. Yeah, she's just glowing because she's cool. Quality is simple. You must be able to animate fast and efficiently, but you have to know where to draw the line and really just focus on making, instead of perfection, focus on making what needs to look good, which is why all these examples aren't exactly the most high quality. For example, Blake is being punctured by bread straight through the body. She should be dead. Same with Ying's arm. But you don't notice these frames because they're not important. Monty's focusing on what you look at, all the things that you ooh and ah at. Monty was never under the impression that everything needed to look good and professional all the time, only where it was high quality in all the important spots. Now I'm going to talk about, I know it was choreography, my section was choreography, but I'm going to talk about camera because I'm taking people's lines. No, but we don't have time to talk a lot about camera, but it's really important, so I'm going to go over a few things. Hopefully everybody knows about the 180-degree rule. And if you don't, then it's very easy to see why it's a bad idea to break the rule. In this example, there's 2 examples of the 180-degree rule being broken. Once the first shot is established, your eyes will have an understanding of where those objects are in the scene. So there's a line starting from where the camera is currently placed, and if in the next shot you break that line, you break that illusion and you break where everybody has those designated objects are in their head. So just don't cross that line and people's brains won't explode. That's basically where I'm getting at for the 180-degree rule. Bad framing is not the same thing, but it's about the same as how it sounds. In this example, characters have no one place on screen, heads are cut from the top frame, but all in all, it looks like the camera was just a second thought. You're constantly having to readjust where your eyes are looking in frame, and it gets tiring to watch after a certain amount of time. And that's not just because I animated that. Yeah, you get dizzy. It's like a carousel. Is that what it's called? Carousel? Merry-go-round, whatever. Last but not least, camera shakes, camera impact, jitters, camera. We call it a lot of different stuff. But the point is, it's a small up and down movement on the camera that it happens on impact. So when a punch lands, slight up and down camera motion, it really adds the spice to the fice.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Very simple, yet you can still screw that up. Shake it too much, and you shake the audience's eyes. That's an example of way too much camera shake. You shake it diagonally, or tilt it. Yeah, tilt it, thank you. And it looks weird. If you can see, it looks weird. It looks like a glitch. Same with this one. This one also looks like a glitch. The point is, just a small up and down movement is all you really need to add the spice to the fice. Now, on to more camera. I'm not going to go over all of this, so I'm going to give it to my friend Hunter.
This is going to be a bit of a difficult concept to describe in a short period of time, so
Lean into the
bear
mic.
with me.
Yeah,
Mike.
closer.
Into the mic.
All right. So please bear with me as I try to describe this as quickly as possible and maybe take notes. So, when it comes to making a fight scene, especially a Monty fight scene, one of the most important ideas is to make sure your viewer doesn't get confused. A good way of doing that is to have any given shot you're making have good framing. Make sure the characters aren't bouncing around the screen unless they're actually moving in 3D space, or the camera is otherwise making the action look good when it's moving around. However, no matter how good your shots are individually with their framing, if the focal point of one shot, let's say there are two characters fighting on the right side of the screen, doesn't line up with another shot you've made that is good right after it on the left side of the screen, you're going to have a problem because the viewer is focused over here, and when the shot cuts over here, they're going to be left stranded looking all the way over here and darting their eyes around the screen until they find what's going on. In which case, they might miss an important detail or miss something cool and be less impressed with your animation. Which, if you're trying to make anything remotely similar to Monty, the last thing you want is for people to not be impressed. So, there are two kinds of metaframing, which is basically making the framing of any given shot in regards to, and taking into consideration, the framing of the shots that come before it or after it, which is very important during a fight scene that is fast-paced. Not so important during a dialogue scene, or maybe where the fight slows down, but if you're in the middle of the action, you want to make sure the viewer does not get confused, and pretty thirsty.
Breathe.
Yeah, just take a breath.
Say hi to you guys. It's really hot outside.
Yep. So, there are two ways to help a viewer keep track of what's going on whenever you make a camera cut. And these are the two ways that you can use metaframing. Two kinds of metaframing. There is positional metaframing and transformational metaframing. I would say transitional, but well, they're all transitional. They're cuts. So, the first type of metaframing, positional metaframing. Cool, that's okay. First type of metaframing, which is positional.
One here, man. What?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm too distracted with all the exciting action on here. So the first kind of metaframing is positional metaframing. That is basically keeping a consistent spot for an element on screen, such as a character, or a prop, or a weapon, anything the viewer needs to be focusing on, in the same place between cuts. before and after. Here is an example of positional metaframing and motion. As you can see here, between each cut, the character doesn't jump across the screen too much. They stay in relatively the same spot, or they continue to move. Here's a still version of one of the cuts. Here, before the cut and after, you can see they don't move very much on the 2D space of the screen. They're roughly in the middle of the screen, a little bit to the right. So whenever it cuts from the first shot to the second shot, the viewer's already looking there, and they can still keep track of what's going on. Mind you, this is a very simple scene, so it's not too hard to keep track of what's going on, even if the framing isn't very good. But in typical multi-action animation, there will be a lot more going on. So any visual aid like this to help the viewer keep track of what's going on will be very helpful. Now, the second type of metaframing, transformational metaframing, is a little more niche and a little more not as required sometimes when making animations, but it's still very helpful many times when you have characters moving around the screen a lot. So when you have transformational metaframing, instead of using the position of the character or prop or weapon or vehicle that you're going to keep track of, you'll be manipulating the movement of an element on screen to guide the viewer's eye. For example, you can have a character moving from the left side of the screen to the right, and you make a cut in the middle, and on the next shot, keep them moving from the left to the right, as the viewer is expecting to be following the character across the screen from the left to the right. You'll not have to have any break in which direction they're moving their eyes. An example of this is a clip from the White trailer, which are more visually engaging to look at here. You have the Armageddon Knight swinging his sword from the left of the screen to the bottom right, and Weiss jumping on here. And then they both continue to move across the screen to the upright in a counterclockwise motion before another cut where the action slows down a little bit. There is a missing a slide. Wait, no, we're not. So, what does a bad example of metaframing look like? And is metaframing really that important? Well, if you look here, we have a similar jump with the dummy from before. However, the only difference is how the camera is treated. The dummy jumps from the bottom left part of the screen all the way to the right, and then they suddenly teleport to the left side of the screen after the first cut, and then, well, they kind of just go all over the place. During a frantic action scene, this would be very hard to follow, and you will be very confused. And that's all I have to add on metaframing, so I'd like to hand the to Eric.
Thank you, Hunter. Hey guys. Let's talk about some VFX. Before I start, I'd like to say hi to my mom from Florida. I love you, Mom. Thank you so much for being so supportive of me. But yeah, let's talk about the importance of VFX in Monty's animation.
I like to say hi to my mom too.
I'd like to say hi to Eric's mom.
I would also like to say hi to Eric's mom.
Hi, moms.
The importance of VFX in Monty's animations, for me, I believe is highly underrated. Like the camera, I believe the VFX elements in his animations to be another character on screen, as well as a representation of the character's personality. Without VFX, what will become of the final piece? The rough animation of the character is essentially like the line work and any sort of sketch art. And then once you add the layer of the VFX onto the final piece, it becomes like the shading or the coloring, and it really pops. And without any of these, well, for lack of a better word, your animations become goofy. So, Monty's use of specific VFX elements is very calculated, and each moment needs a specific element to show a meaning, deliver an impact, show speed, or even convey an aesthetic. Speed lines, slash effects, explosions, particles, the whole gist, much, much more. Now, let's take a look at an example. The Black trailer is one of my favorite trailers. Imagine if the iconic look of the red trees and the aura that's surrounding it is green. Looks weird, right? This color was very specific to the identity of the trailer. At the end, it changes to a deep red with Blake being highlighted in black, with the leaves in black to show a poetic picture as she fades away. Without these specific choices, the very essence of the trailer is removed. This is visual storytelling through effects. Another example is the yellow trailer. With Yang in the yellow trailer, Monty made use of color changes, smears, to help really convey Yang's rage as she rushed in. And because of these elements, it's as iconic as we remember it. And without having any context as to who Yang is, we can still get a sense of who her personality is, just based on these effects. Now, let's talk about Adam. The glow on his hair, on his mask, and the very dramatic color change on the moon slice. All specific VFX choices to show his aggressive nature. If instead his colors were, let's say, blue or green, that would be contradicting to his character. Now, one of my favorites, Ruby. Everybody loves Ruby, right? So, Ruby is like a rose. Right? Ruby Rose. Like a rose, she's graceful, beautiful, and dangerous. Monty made clever use of pedicle particles to show her gracefulness as she begins to move at speed. But she's also reckless, very reckless. So when she speeds up, we see a dramatic color change to accentuate that speed and that tunnel vision as we live it through her eyes. All very specific VFX elements when it came to showing who she is as a character, conveying that imagery to the viewer. Now, let's put it to an example with the character I animated. Her name is Yella. She's my favorite, one of my favorites. I animated it with the intention of the rope flourishing around her at speed. The use of the rapid circular slashes really helped convey that and showcasing her skill with the weapon. And without the VFX added to this whole piece, I really hate to reiterate, without it, it just looks goofy. And none of that visual information is just there. Now, moving on, we have VFX cards. Cards are literally just like a flat 2D plane that either play back an image sequence or have a procedural texture on them. Generally, it's an effect like a sword slash, an explosion, impacts, mirrors, smoke, the list can go on forever. Cards generally, well, they speed up a lot of the VFX work in camera as opposed to taking way more time than is needed to create a unique element for every situation. Monty used a program called Particle Illusion. In it is pre-made particles. He then put those exports of effects onto a card as an image sequence, and then manipulated that card to create the desired effects. Cards are not just limited to just planes. You can deform them and edit them however you see fit and make it fit your needs. A member who's actually here in the audience, Joel Reynolds, is actually this guy right here. He's one of the other members who works on VFX, and he created some cards with like VFX, like those flashes over there, using some really awesome procedural textures. Now, let's talk about when it came to animating weapons. Like Ruby's Scythe, for example. Monty made use of smear cards made specifically for each weapon. These are just still images animated rapidly in a circle. So it's just a photo, and then you just literally spin it around as you're animating. It's just that easy. Monty was efficient as much as possible when it came to his workflow. VFX are very, very time intensive, and the use of cards really sped up a lot of the shots, since they were already made and just reused and re-edited to fit the need of the shots. Even here, when we make our own animations, we already have pre-made cards, and it speeds up a lot of the pipeline. The use of smear cards really created that unique style that Monty really brought to weapons, and it just looks cool. Now we have an example of smears that Landon made. Thank you, Landon. We have two clips, one where the weapon smears and one without it. Without it, something feels off. The visual information is mushed up in the speed of the rapid moving swords, and it's hard to read the information given. And on the other, the trail of the weapons is visibly clear, easier to read. Also with VFX, fights can happen at longer distances, so you can add upon to your existing choreography, as you can see here. So you're not just limited to like close combat. You can let your imagination go wild. Now we have speed lines. Speed lines are literally lines animated moving rapidly in one direction. And with clever use of speed lines, we can really accentuate rapid intense motion and create that anime feel. Typically used in showing a character running or a big anticipation wind-up or on a massive hit. Now, with all of that, as an example, with all the principles I just explained and put together to create that ultimate iconic finisher that stands out in your fights. Well, there's more speed lines right there. See? So, with clever use of all the elements, again, added onto all these elements. Okay, gotta get the clear display. I use the speed lines in certain areas of the movement to really accentuate and pull focus towards one area. For example, on the bottom right clip, I have the speed lines really placed right on her leg, along with the smears. And on the left side of the clip, you'll see my favorite, I have the speed lines going towards the direction of her swing to accentuate that movement. And on the top, right on the punch, I pull focus right there on the punch to really bring attention there to that impact. Without even a single detail of who these characters are, you already get a sense of who their personality is, and you don't even know their names. That is visual effects through storytelling, and you already get the idea of their personalities. Think about VFX elements and how it can help with your animations, and most importantly, think about your narrative aesthetic when creating projects. This is the most important one of all. Now, I'm going to bring it back to Gabriel, who's going to talk about Monty's workflow.
So, once you've considered everything, particle effects, choreography, everything, all that, once you've considered all of it, you have to manage your workflow. And Monty Oum's workflow was purely about speed of production and efficiency. Because of that, he was a proponent of a method called the open timeline. So typically, animation studios will storyboard, and then they'll come up with previs, and then they'll actually create most of the animation and then iterate over time. But Monty did things a little bit differently. So his workstation was laden with a ridiculous amount of monitors, and 3 of them would be devoted to 3 different things. His video editor, his animation program, and the folder with all of his shot files and folders. The idea is that you would animate a shot good enough and then immediately import it into the timeline. Like we were talking about with Play Blast, it's live animation. There is absolutely no polish to it whatsoever. You complete the shot and then put it into the timeline. Then you do that over and over again until the entire timeline is filled. And then after that, only after you fill the entire timeline with unfinished shots, you go back and you overwrite and reiterate and polish until the deadline arrives. Monty pushed that very hard to make sure that the timeline was filled with shots and not necessarily finished ones. You can see we have the file folder. In the folder, you would have a massive array of folders with each, within them, a massive image sequence because it was easier to do transparency rendering them as images. Then you would import them into the timeline. You can do this out of order as well. If you have part of the animation plotted out, you can do the end and the middle and then fill the gaps in. So here's an example of a Play Blast rough shot. You can actually see in my example, you can still see the armatures on the characters because it's so unfinished. There's no background, there's no colors, there's no effects or anything. So you fill the whole timeline with shots like that, and then you can add effects, you can do background, you can do colors, lighting, everything, but only after you have filled the entire timeline with shots. You may not get to the point that you want by the deadline, but you'll have something. So everything that we've talked about, it's something that you can do too. This all feels so very complicated and something that's unattainable, but you can actually do all of this yourself. There's many ways to get started in animation, and like we were saying before, you don't need expensive software or hardware to do any of this. You saw Monty's laptop, you can't tell me you didn't. All of these programs here, MMD, Blender, and Source Filmmaker, they're all free programs, and they all have enough complex control that you can get started yourself in fight animations and do them exactly the same way that Monty did. We all have our own resources for you as well. I run the channel Cake Station. On there I have an entire animation series called Animation Analysis where I talk specifically about Monty Oum's work and how to do it in even more detail than we've covered today. We also have the YouTube channel for Project Rose itself. There we actually have several upscaled old animations that Monty made, as well as a ton of some potentially lost interviews with Monty. So, like I said before, our goal with Project Rose is to teach you how to do this stuff, and I would be a hypocrite if I did not have the ability to do the things I'm telling you you can do. And so I would like to show you now, after 8 years of my own personal study, entirely animated by myself, is the opening scene of the long-awaited fan project, Ruby OVA 2.
I'm proud of you, man.
Alright, unfortunately, I don't think we have enough time for a Q&A, unless you want to like run up to me and ask something. Do we have time?
Oh, we're...
Alright, we gotta be out of here. But you can catch me outside, I'll be here.
Come from outside. But
Yeah, we also have all those social links. Look us up, Project
We're
Rose.
not Taylor Swift. It's not impossible to get hold of us.
Yeah, we're
Don't
talk to
worry.
us. We're people
They're
too.
working towards it.
They're singing for you.
That's the end. Goodbye.